Hey folks, Ben Greenfield here from RockstarTriathlete.com, and today I'm going to show you the bare minimum that you need to know to take apart your bike when you travel so that it will fit into a box. I know that can be a little bit intimidating for some people, but by using some of the techniques I show you in this video, you should at least be able to get to the point where you can fit your bike in a travel box and travel with it if that's something that you want to do. So we'll just start with all the basic components of the bike one by one, and you can follow me along with the camera. We'll get going here. The first thing that we're going to adjust here is going to be the seat post, or more specifically, we're going to remove it. Before I remove that, I want to make sure that I know exactly where it was at. I could draw on it. I don't like to draw on my seat post because a lot of times I'll change my seat height throughout the year, and I don't like it to be pre-measured. So I'll just use this strip of electrical tape. So run the electrical tape around the seat post where it attaches into the seat tube, and that will allow you, when you unpack your bike, to know how far into the seat tube to insert your seat post. So we're going to wrap that guy around there, and then the next thing that we're going to do is actually remove the seat post from the seat tube. Now, probably the biggest mistake that folks make is not when they're taking the seat post off, but when they're putting it back on. If you over tighten a seat post that is designed like this one is, you can easily snap the bracket or do damage to the seat post itself by over tightening these screws. So you definitely do not want to over tighten. So what I'm going to do now is just pull this guy out of here. Sometimes you got to smack it a little bit. Okay, so this guy's out, but we know exactly where it goes when it goes back in. Now, the only other thing that I want to make sure of is if this thing's going to be on an airplane or in a bus or something like that, and these little guys right here that I just unscrewed a little bit, these seat bracket bolts, if I leave them loose, they could fall out, so I'll just hand tighten them back on with my thumb. That way they're nice and secure in there. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to move on to the rear derailleur. And the reason that I'm going to remove the rear derailleur is because if it's attached to the bike, a lot of times there's a lot less flexibility in terms of the tightness of the space that I can fit that bike into. A lot of bike boxes, you won't even be able to fit the bike unless you take off the rear derailleur. It's super simple to do. Before I do it, I'm going to make sure that I've shifted my bike into the lowest gear on the back. So I'll go ahead and do a couple more shifts here. Okay, so this is the rear derailleur. Okay, there's a hole in the rear derailleur right here. You're going to put, oh, actually I'm going to go with, I don't remember which size works. Yeah, let me go with this guy. All I'm going to do is unscrew. Now, again, when we talk about common errors when you're taking apart your bike, one of the errors that people make is when they put the rear derailleur back on, they don't line it up properly. And when you put that rear derailleur back on, make sure that you attach it in the same way that it was when you detach it. So take a good look at it, at where the screw on the back of it lies, the barrel adjuster screw, and make sure that lines up on the bike where it was before. Don't mess around with anything on your derailleur except what I just showed you, unless you want to be doing some adjustments of your rear derailleur once you put your bike back together. Okay, that's all that you need to do. The reason that I took that off is because I've got it out of the way, and I just do that after I do the seat post. This is just the order that I go in. Okay, next I'm going to go to my water bottle cage. This is a very simple one. Everybody should know how to take off their water bottle cage. And the reason I'm going to take this off is because I like to wrap it in some bubble wrap or a towel when it's in my, my bike box. If I leave it on the frame, it can become damaged, and I found that to occur. It's also just a little bit of extra space that it takes up in this V here, and a lot of times you'll be able to tuck other things into that V when you put it in your bike box. Now, again, you don't want any loose screws when you're traveling, so I'll just take these screws and I'll put them right back in to the bike. So anything that could be, got butterfingers here, anything that could be rolling around loose, you want to make sure that you get rid of that and make sure it's nice and tightened down. Okay, Next thing that we're going to do is remove the pedals. Now, different pedals are going to have different ways of taking them off. This particular guy is basically, I believe it's an 8mm on my pedal wrench, so we may be able to go with this guy. No. These are new pedals, so I still got to get used to the width. Okay, here we go. So with the pedals, a lot of times if you drop the pedal down to about 90 degrees and then use that leverage to turn, it's a lot better than trying to just muscle up against the bike. And that guy's off. I can almost guarantee that for any bike box you're going to need to remove your pedals. And again, folks, this is going to be probably about a 10 to 15 minute process of taking everything apart. However, I did lie. Usually I take off the pedals before I remove that derailleur, just so it's not screwing around as I'm turning my cranks. So you'll a lot of times you'll be able to save some money by taking your bike apart rather than somebody else doing it for you, and you'll learn a lot about your bike as well as you're doing this. So you may not be able to get the best camera shot as I take that pedal off, but there we go. And take a look at your pedals and whether or not you actually have spacers in them. So for example, you'll see that as I take this right pedal off, just based off of the way that I like to have my bike set up, I have a spacer on this right pedal, and if that thing's just kind of floating loose, I might lose it while I'm traveling. So both my pedals will go into a Ziploc bag, and I'll put the spacer into the Ziploc bag along with those pedals. I only have a spacer on my right side just because my right foot tends to toe out a little bit more than my left foot, but I have that spacer I want to keep track of. Okay, next up we're going to move up to the fun part. And first thing, I'll take this power tap off, get it out of the way. And again, this is another thing you're going to want to put in a safe place, not keep attached to the bike while the bike is traveling. Okay, now you'll see that there's lots of little bolts here that you could loosen and play around with. There's only a few that I'm going to need to worry about for this bike. First thing I'm going to need to remove is my aero bar pads. Okay, the bike will just be more compact if I take them off. If you have the option of removing your aero bar pads, I do recommend it. So this is a pretty simple removal. Lots of aero bars are put together different ways. But again, pretty easy to take on and off. And this is one of those deals where once I've got the pad off, I'm going to take this bolt that I'm unscrewing, and once I take that guy off, I'm going to screw the bolt back in again, so it's one less thing that's floating around that I have to keep track of. Okay, we'll do the same thing over here. Take this guy off. You may find that taking apart your bike can be a slightly messy process. I always clean my bike, especially the oil off my chain and my chain ring before going through this process, just so there's that much less crap that I get on myself. Okay, so this guy comes off nicely. Put him down here. And again, most of these components that you're seeing me remove and set on the ground, those will be wrapped in bubble wrap or in a towel when they go into my bike box, again, so they're not floating around, so that they're protected, and so that also they're not damaging the bicycle. Okay, next up we're going to actually remove the aero bars and handlebars themselves. And the first thing that you want to do is unscrew this guy right here. Okay, this is basically like a star nut on the top, and this bolt goes down into your fork, your head tube. And again, common mistake is when people put this one back on, they tighten it up too tight. Okay, that's a hand tighten only. Alright, you don't have to get all fancy and go out and get a torque wrench, but I'll set this guy in the ground again. Going to be a lot of little pieces in here. Now, another thing you're going to want to take a look at is you'll notice that there's spacers on the top right here. And there's going to be spacers on the bottom as well. Make sure that you know which ones are on the top and which ones are on the bottom, so when you put this guy back together, you are not riding in a much different position than what you were accustomed to before you took it apart. Okay, we're going to loosen this guy, and we actually don't have to take these guys all the way out. We can just loosen them. Okay, going to loosen this one. Now there's a lot of different bike boxes out there, and some of them will come with special instructions for special things you got to take off. For example, we're not going to get into it in my video today, but with the bike box that I use, because it puts my bike into 2 separate cases so I don't have to pay airline fees, I do need to take my crank off. We aren't going to go into crank removal today. Okay, a few other things that you need to take into consideration here is that you've got a couple spacers on the bottom, okay? Now, if you're going to end up removing your fork, which a lot of times will be the case depending on the bike case that you're using, okay, this guy will come off. All right, now I'm going to remove my front wheel. Everybody should know how to remove your front wheel. Just a simple skewer here. Wheel comes out. Okay, now you're going to notice that if I remove my fork, okay, which I'm going to do right now, there are a couple of things that you want to take into consideration. Okay, see this guy right here? Make sure that you know whether it's facing up or down so that you put it on the same way that you took it off. Usually the writing on it is going to be up. Now this is a separate piece, but if you take these off together and make sure they stay together, then you'll put that on the right way. Again, when you put your fork back on, your bike won't steer properly unless you make sure that you take that into consideration. And you saw this little guy pop out the bottom right there, okay? This guy, same thing, okay? Handwriting goes up when that guy goes on the bottom, okay? And if it helps you take photographs as you do this, that's fine. All right, so very last thing back here is we'll take off the rear wheel. Okay, and this will be very easy to do because we've already removed the derailleur. Okay, now if you want to back up with the camera and get a wide angle, you can go over there and take a shot of this. Okay, so basically what we've got now, I know it looks like a mess, but this is pretty clean, okay? So we've got our bike, we've got our handlebars, we've got our fork, and we've got our frame. Okay, so you can pretty much at this point wrap all this stuff around each other, so the handlebar will kind of go up into the bike like this, the fork will go one way, and this will easily fit into just about any bike box out there. Took me, you know, whatever, 10-15 minutes to take apart. It'll take 10-15 minutes to put back together. Learn how to do it. You'll learn your bike. You'll learn the way that your bike is built. Highly recommend that you try that out. So this is Ben Greenfield from RockstarTriathlete.com, and in the next video in this series, I'll show you how to actually put the bike into a case.